All right. So this is going to be one of those where I kind of expand a little bit on things I've said before. But, you know, throughout history, especially the 20th century, it's important to realize you have to look beyond the rhetoric and the propaganda of a particular organization or full on government. Because they can claim one thing all they want to, but it's a whole other thing of who they actually work with. So you think of, for example, I don't know, you think of the origins of the Mujahideen, right? There's a whole lot of different groups within the Mujahideen. Now, this is before some of those elements became the Taliban. You think of there were Maoists who joined the Mujahideen to help out defeat the evil imperialist Soviet Union. You had, like I say, some Japanese Gomis and whatnot who came in. Hold on, I gotta close the door again. Cats are wiling out. I'm just gonna leave that flub in there. Who cares? But there are all sorts of folks who came in. Now, who gave them the weapons to defeat the Soviets? Well, primarily the United States. Specifically with the Stinger missiles who helped to take down the Mi-24 helicopters, right? The Hind. Now, there are many other examples that you can point to, but, they also got help from, Al-Qaeda. Of course, Al-Qaeda, was kicked out of Saudi Arabia, and they worked with the Taliban because they had similar views and being Salafist, and they had a similar worldview, right? You could say the same thing for other groups, right? Now, the thing is, of course, this is the political chess game that goes. But the thing is, though, is that there are some basic rules and some basic understanding I think everybody should understand. That way we can get the idea. Number one is influence. Is okay. Do we have similar influences? Do we have similar worldviews, this and that, right? Now, this is, like I say, it depends, because obviously, you can look at World War II and say, well, the Arrow-Cross Party ultimately cucked to, Hitler and the Nazi Party in Germany. So ultimately, was that a fair relationship? Like I say, usually it's one power is stronger than the other. But that's the influence that it is. Like, okay, can you help me defeat this? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, sort of thing, right? So because the Soviet Union needed to be defeated, the United States went and helped the Mujahideen. There were some groups, of course, within the Mujahideen who didn't get support from the United States and instead just took Soviet bits and made it work. They eventually mostly, became kind of the resistance to the Taliban, this and that, but that's a whole other thing, Like I say, it's a very delicate thing. It's a very delicate situation. But to me, that's what influence comes to. They got influence from the United States, not in the sense that they were both, believed in more of a Salafist version of Islam, but more of a sense of we have to defeat the Soviet Union no matter what. So who cares? It's the same thing with Daesh getting support from the United States and the UK and everything else, right? You could say the same thing with whoever group, But generally speaking, it's about influence and about, not looking who's really controlling the strings. The second, of course, leads into infrastructure. When you're looking for a political ally, you're going to have a country that has, and you do have to have a country, no anarchists, you can't just build it yourself. No, you have to have a country that has infrastructure and can build arms quickly. Like I said, the Soviet Union supporting North Korea, DPRK, right? China giving support and giving weapons to Vietnam. Soviet Union also gives support to Vietnam, right? They gave them all those MG-34s and all those PaK 40s and whatnot that they captured from German Wehrmacht, right? And they said, we don't feel like having them, so here you go, Viet Cong. Have a good luck with that, MG-34 from 1944 or something like that, right? But it's about how can they provide, right? Yeah, the Wrecking Crew. Yeah, the Wrecking Crew, LaRouche Gang, the FBA/NOI. Yeah. I was looking at a comment from Kareem Moop. Maybe I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit, but I think these are the two main things that people have to think about. Is between politics and the allies that you choose, right? Because the way you have to set it, and it's more complicated nowadays because the information is more readily out there, is now they use the term critical support, right? So they'll say even though the United States gives support to Kurdistan, to Rojava, they will say, oh, well, we support the YPG and YPJ. We give them critical support because they're fighting the Turkish fascists. Even though they also sell oil to Israel, this and that. But, or they, or same type of thing where people may say critical support for the Taliban for retaking Afghanistan, right? And we see, of course, countries are playing the game, right? The UK is already being like, well, we have to make our choices. We got beaten by them already, so who cares? Let's make our deals then. That was more Australian, probably, but the Brits are being pragmatic. They're like, let's make our deals with the Taliban. Why not? The reality is that groups do not have to be as delicately, like I said, it's a complicated world, but I imagine that regardless of what people may say is that, like I say, I remember listening to that Surviving Vimerica podcast, and he was just like, he gave allusions to the to TRS and the TRS folks over there getting support from Russian oligarchs, this and that. Probably true. I'm not even going to say it's wrong. But the thing is, though, that's where they get their support from. You have to at least realize who's giving you that support, right? I think it's important to realize this because I think this leads to like conspiracy theory stuff where it's like, well, they work with the Rothschilds, isn't that? They completely agree with them. And I was like, that's too simple. I think it's one of those things where it's like they think they're playing them and the other side thinks they're using them as a pawn, right? That's just how things are, right? I mean, you think about Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they probably think in their mind somewhere that, actually we did this ourselves. There's probably some folks who actually think that. The reality is, of course, is that they are backed by Turkey and that they are Turkish puppets, so they will do what they're told. Same thing with the various Salafist groups in Afrin and the other areas controlled by Turkey, right? Same thing with the Free Syrian Army, right? I don't even know where the Free Syrian Army is right now. They may have been sent back to Idlib province, but they realize that they're getting their support from Turkey because Turkey has enough infrastructure to do that. Syria is getting 2 sponsors, right? They have Russia for their air force and training of the military, because obviously the Russian military does have experience in that. But they also get support from Hezbollah, which gets their support from Iran. So they have those 2 sponsors making that work, right? This is these are very basic things in my opinion, but if there's going to be I'm just going to be Fed posty here, but let's get into it. If there's going to be a future insurrection or event in the United States, people are going to have to choose sides. Russia, China, Iran, I doubt, but the Chinese already have a fair amount of influence, as we know. Russia, I think less so. I think that the Chinese influence, though, is a little more low-key, I think, in some times, and they obviously have used the kind of standard spy stuff, as we saw with that Caldwell guy, or Eric Swalwell. Sorry, Swallows well, yeah. I can't think of it. It all goes by so quickly. I'm trying to think of what sort of BS he went through. Who was he smashing? Let me see here. Career in local politics. Let's see here. One against Allison Hayden. Yeah, Chinese spy. Yeah, Christine Fong. Yeah, this Christine Fong gal. Fong, as she was known. Like I said, pretty standard sort of, spy stuff where it's just like, yeah, we sleep with them and they tell them. I saw that Lisa, that Christine Fong, she should have gotten some combat pay, definitely, for some of those dudes that she smashed. Ooh, lordy, they were not good looking. But so people are going to have to wonder where they're going to get their support from. Yeah, the United States has resources, sure. But the thing is, though, is that there are plenty of feds as well. That's the biggest problem. There are plenty of infiltrators in these groups. So it's like there's no real secret, in my opinion. So people are going to have to reach out to other folks, right? To me, this is natural. It's like with Israel, as much as they disliked the British, they still needed the British for the Balfour Declaration. And afterwards, after the Second World War, they're like, fuck you, get the hell out of our land, right? And so they killed as many Brits as they could to get them the hell out. Sergeant's Affair, the King David Hotel bombing, I know they'll say, oh, the British knew about it, and, But still, regardless, And of course, the Brits, I think, depending on who you talk to, the Tories, of course, are still just pitiful. They're no better than the Republican Party, where they're just, they'll cuck to Israel any day of the week. I think that the UK, still has a fair amount of a grudge against the state of Israel. Rightly so, because of the King David Hotel bombing and the Sergeant's Affair. But anyway, political allies come and go, right? And there's that point where I think, do you just want to get money? And this is a big thing too, I think. Where do you just need finances, or do you need weapons and financing and a way to cover it up, right? Like I say, we think of, the Bolsheviks, right? Now, of course, you could also say, oh, well, Hitler got support from the big, the big companies and whatnot. I do ironically have that book, The Big Business and Hitler, which I do have on my shelf. And so eventually one day I will read it, ironically. But and I do also have another book, of course, The Destruction, or the The Wages of Destruction by Adam Tooze, which is a huge book about the economy of Nazi Germany, which I'm sure will kind of, fill in the holes maybe from other books. But anywho, you have to think, if you're going to be a legitimate dissident, you're going to need some sort of support. And this is the problem with movements today, where they just kind of want to LARP and think that somehow they're just going to get support. And it's just like, the fact is that there's an element of pragmatism that has to be realized, where it's like you're going to have to reach out and make these things work. Anarchists live in this fantasy world where they're just like, we're gonna take over this area and we're gonna create we're gonna have communes and stuff like that. How are you gonna deal with the rest of the world? In general, anarchists don't know how to do that. So I think regardless of what people may say, is that you're gonna have to find some folks that understand how international relations work. And, at least understand what different policies are and everything else like that, right? And I think that's one of the weaknesses of today, right? Where there's not really anybody willing to break out of that liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican mold, generally speaking, And like I say, libertarian, nobody wants anything to do with it in general, as we saw with the Gretchen Whitmer thing, completely infiltrated. You look at the other side, with Antifa. Yeah, I'm sure you can point to some inclusions and whatnot. I know Caleb Maupin tries to do this with the bread tube stuff, because to me, that's a hell of a stretch. I'm sure that gymnasts are like, that's a hell of a stretch, man. But when Caleb Maupin apparently came out with his book talking about how bread tube is controlled by this therapist guy, I'm like, huh? And his literal straw man is because ironically, another Caleb Kane, aka I can't think of his name. I can't think of his username offhand. Anyway, y'all know who it is. But Caleb Kane, because he talked to him once, suddenly he's like, Faraday speaks. That's it. But Faraday speaks because he talks to him once. He's suddenly like, but like I say, in general, I think Faraday speaks, he lost a lot of influence. I think, I have a feeling that whatever influence he did have is gone. I think there are other folks who are kind of pushing the bread tube line and everything in there. And they have their folks who are promoting their bullshit. But I think it's all online shit. What's happening in real life, though? What's happening on the ground? And on the ground, not much is going on, in my opinion. It's the same old stuff that you'll see between, Antifa and Proud Boys up in wherever. The real white nationalist movement, or the, whichever you want to say, that stuff is dead. That died at Charlottesville. Will it come back? In some form, but in general, it's been pushed online. National Socialist movement is dead. It's not to say it doesn't exist and there aren't individual actors, but they've gone much more to a leaderless sort of form of resistance, where it's just like, and of course now with this recent Adam Waffen and Orders of the Nine Angels type stuff, that shit has, really destroyed that image, right? So, it goes to show these folks don't have any legitimate power anywhere. We're still stuck in this, and this is part of the reason maybe why, even though I talk about it a lot, about balkanization, this and that, it is unrealistic to a point, because people are still stuck in the Democrat-Republican fake duopoly. They don't want to break out of that and find something else. And so that's why various folks ultimately have to pander to that idea. They have to pander to the whole Republican Democratic stuff. How successful it is a matter of opinion, but I don't know. I think that's all I have to say on that. This wasn't as organized as I thought it was going to be, but the heck with it. Basically, if you take nothing else from this, is just to realize that it's complicated. And that, the allies that you have today may not be your allies tomorrow. And you have to realize what you actually need them for. If you need them for finances, okay, be sure to have some sort of plan to pay them back. Or if it's for ammo, be prepared. Don't just rely on them for ammo. Learn how to make your own, right? And just be aware that, they don't, like I say, the host nation, I'll put it this way. The host nation does not care about your little rebellion. The Nazis in general didn't give a shit about Ukrainian nationalism. They didn't care about, Armenian nationalism or Azerbaijani nationalism or whichever, right? They didn't care. It's the same thing with, do you think Turkey actually gives a shit about, having some, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham controlling this little part of Idlib province? No, they don't care. They just want you to stay there and defend it because, you're all just dupes who got fooled into this, So you have to be able to realize where you are in the hierarchy, and you need to kind of play your cards the best that you can, right? And try not to get screwed over and get what you can out of the deal. And if you can build that strength, then okay. It's a lot harder nowadays because the internet reveals all. So even if you go, if you want to say, oh, well, I've never taken any money. And then, of course, people say, not according to this. There was a time when people, these books would have to come out years later to talk about what happened. Nowadays, you have Twitter, you have whichever, right? And they'll say, oh, well, look at this document here, or look at this tax return here, or whichever, right? And they'll say that's not true. So it's harder to create movements because of that, relatively speaking. Unless you get some real true believers and whatnot who are dedicated regardless. But, yeah. This kind of turned into ranty, ravey type stuff, but I think it's very basic to understand. And I think that it's something that if you really want to do something, quote unquote, you're going to have to figure it out. And that's my opinion about it anyway. And you have to be able to make deals with some folks that you don't agree with, but if it serves a larger purpose, you're going to do what you're going to have to do. But yeah, so that's going to take a lot, basically is that people need to just stop LARPing on the internet and see if they can't go further. Otherwise, they're just going to be meme movements where it's just like you're just talking about the same old bullshit without any real institutional power whatsoever. People have tried infiltrating different movements and everything else like that. They've tried to infiltrate mainstream politics. They've tried to infiltrate government. And in general, in the modern day, it doesn't work because people are too LARPy and they want to show their loyalty to whatever political group they have, right? So if they... So yeah, I would probably recommend if you do all that shit, do an alias or something like that and, find some... I don't know. Telegram, I mean, that's Fed Post Central. Gab, that's Fed Post Central. I don't know, but people are going to have to figure that out. It's going to be a much more complicated game. But I think it can still be done. It's just a matter of time and learning the right ingredients to make it work. Anyway, That's all I got to say on that. A little bit Fed posty, but I think in general, this isn't too out of the, I don't think it's too far detailed or anything else like that. It's fairly general, I think. Anyway, hopefully y'all enjoy that. See you later. Goodbye.